By the late 16th century, the map of the Indian subcontinent was moving toward a single imperial color. Emperor Akbar was systematically absorbing independent territories through a combination of overwhelming military force and high-stakes diplomacy. Many powerful Rajput kings chose a pragmatic path to survival. They agreed to become Mughal vassal states, trading their political autonomy for guaranteed safety, personal wealth, and positions of influence within the imperial court. Maharana Pratap of Mewar was raised in a different environment. Born within the defensive walls of the Kumbhalgarh fort, he spent his youth among soldiers and commoners in the rugged Aravalli hills, developing a worldview centered on the land rather than the luxuries of a distant palace. When Akbar sent a series of high-level envoys to negotiate a surrender, including the influential Rajput general Raja Man Singh I, Pratap rejected every proposal. He maintained a hardline stance that Mewar's independence was not a commodity for sale or negotiation. This refusal closed the door on any diplomatic compromise. Akbar required a continent that obeyed a single imperial center. Pratap required a Mewar that answered only to its own history. These two opposing visions could no longer share the same map. The collision occurred in June 1576. Akbar dispatched a massive army to break the resistance, leaving Pratap's forces heavily outnumbered and facing a military machine with vastly superior resources. To counter the imperial numbers, Pratap used the geography of the Aravalli Hills as a strategic force multiplier. He drew the Mughal army into Haldighati, where steep rock walls reduced them into a narrow line. He integrated indigenous-built tribesmen into his command. Led by Rana Punja, these archers held the high ridges, turning the pass into a trap for imperial forces below. When an army cannot win on an open field, its survival depends on moving the battlefield into a harsh environment that negates the enemy's size. On the morning of June 18th, the two armies met in the yellow-soiled pass. The space was so confined that the battle quickly became a dense, chaotic clash of soldiers, horses, and elephants fighting at close quarters. Leading the Rajput charge, Pratap rode his warhorse, Chetak, directly at the enemy's center. In a desperate tactical move, Chetak reared up and planted his front hooves on the head of an imperial war elephant, allowing Pratap to launch a direct strike at the Mughal commander. The strike failed to reach its target. The momentum of the charge stalled, and the weight of the Mughal army began to collapse onto the Rajput vanguard. Pratap was soon surrounded and at immediate risk of capture. Seeing the king in danger, Man Singh forced his way to the front and seized the royal crown and insignia. By wearing these markers of the king, he intentionally drew the full weight of the Mughal pursuit onto himself, buying Pratap the seconds needed to disappear into the hills. Man Singh accepted certain death to ensure that the head of the resistance escaped the battlefield. His sacrifice meant that even as the battle was lost, the symbol of Mewar's independence remained intact. Pratap retreated into the mountains, but his horse, Chetak, had suffered a deep, disabling gash to his leg during the elephant charge. Despite the injury, the horse continued to carry the king away from the pursuing Mughal cavalry. Their escape route was suddenly blocked by a massive mountain ravine. For a wounded animal carrying a rider in heavy armor, the gap was physically impossible to cross. With the enemy closing in, Chetak used his remaining strength to leap from the cliff edge. He cleared the gap, landing on the far side and putting an impassable obstacle between Pratap and his pursuers. The effort was fatal. Chetak collapsed and died moments after reaching safety. Today, a stone shrine stands at the site, marking the spot where the horse's endurance saved the king's life. This final act of stamina ensured the rebellion outlived its most vulnerable moment. It remains the defining image of the war, a moment where the sheer will to survive transformed a retreat into a lasting legend of sacrifice. The Mughal army held the battlefield at Haldighati, but they failed their primary objective. Pratap remained free, and as long as he stayed uncaptured, the imperial victory was incomplete. However, the resistance was forced into a state of extreme hardship. Pratap and his family lived in exile deep within the wilderness, moving constantly between simple mud walls and thatched shelters to evade imperial patrols. Throughout years of poverty and surviving on wild grains, his wife, Ajabde, remained his most critical advisor. She consistently pushed him to maintain the struggle for Mewar's independence, rather than accept the security of a surrender. But by the late 1570s, the rebellion hit a breaking point. As this data suggests, while the Mughal treasury was effectively limitless, Pratap's resources had depleted entirely. He could no longer afford to feed his soldiers or arm new recruits. An insurgency is rarely defeated by military power alone. It is more often suffocated when its supply lines fail and its treasury reaches zero. At the peak of this financial crisis, a minister named Bama Shah arrived at the rebel camp. He handed over his entire personal life savings to Pratap, providing the rebellion with an unexpected and massive injection of capital. This private funding allowed Pratap to rearm his men and reorganize his scattered forces. It transformed the resistance from a starving group of exiles back into a functioning military threat. Over the following years, Pratap launched a sustained guerrilla campaign. He utilized the mountains to isolate Mughal outposts and gradually reclaimed his land, eventually restoring sovereign control over large portions of Mewar. Maharana Pratap's legacy suggests a specific metric for victory. While the Mughal Empire possessed superior wealth and numbers, Mewar possessed an unyielding stamina for independence. That endurance, sustained by the high-cost sacrifices of those who believed in the cause, ultimately proved more durable than imperial expansion.